What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And in today's video I am going to be continuing the recaps of 2024, the best of videos, and we are going to be looking at the best knockouts of 2024. That's right, I've compiled 50 fucking KOs that took place, or 50 finishes that took place via way of KO/TKO in 2024, and I'm going to be ranking them all on a tier list. We've got 6 categories. Now, you might notice the category towards the middle there named Fighting Nerds. Yes, I've done that on purpose just to rage bait people. I was going to call it just Carlos Prates, but then I was like, I need to be able to put like 8 or 9 KOs in each tier because of how many fucking KOs that I've got here. So yeah, we're covering all bases. We're looking at solid KOs, TKOs, we're looking at really crazy KOs, and then we're looking at the best of the best KOs that are going to be replayed years from now. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video. Also, thanks for 13k subs. Really appreciate that, guys. Anyway, let's get started. To start off, Ilia Borralho versus Max Holloway. I'm going to put this in the top tier, you know that. Look, just for the significance, not because like necessarily if you just look at the KO without the names involved, which is what I want to do for most of these finishes, but you just can't ignore the fact that this dude did KO Max Holloway. So for most of them, I'm going to try and ignore the names and just look at the actual knockout, but it's made more special and more significant when you're knocking out Max fucking Holloway, who's never been basically dropped before, and you're being the first guy to finish him. Plus the KO itself was still pretty sick. So I think this is going to be replayed 5 years from now as, oh my god, this is when Holloway got knocked out. Less so for like the old spinning wheel kick from Barboza KO type of thing, and more like this was just absolutely nuts, the fact that Ilia finished Holloway. Anyway, let's move on though to the next fight. Next up, Buckley vs Wonderboy. I'm moving through these pretty quickly. I'm going to try to, at least, because otherwise this tier list is going to go for a fucking hour. This was a brutal KO. The big meaty hook from Joaquin Buckley put Wonderboy out cold. Definitely one of the best KOs of the year. Let's move on though to, and especially given the level of striker that it's against, which you do have to take into some consideration. Like, if this was against a fucking bum, then I wouldn't count it as highly, but like your KO and Wonderboy, not many people do that. Anyway, let's move on. Now, let me tell you about this kid, Carlos Prates. This guy's badass. No, but he does, as I've made this Fighting Nerds tier for one reason and one reason only, because I have no issue with these glaze allegations. I'm going to fully embrace them. And yes, I'm going to include an entire tier in this video just for Fighting Nerds KOs. And Carlos Prates against Charles Radtke was one of those. Yes, these are going to be differing levels. Like, yes, I could have just had another tier in there and put these, scattered these across the list, but fuck it. I just wanted to highlight how many KOs these guys are getting, and the knee KO from Radtke, while it was from Prates to Radtke, while it was to the body, was probably the best body shot of the year. I would say the best, like the nastiest looking kind of body shot KO of the year. Anyway, let's move on though to the next fight. We got another body shot finish. I'm going to go with Jones and Stipe Miocic. This was a pretty good spinning back kick finish from John Jones. Definitely a cool finish, I guess, but I don't want to give him any credit. So yeah, this ain't going in the fucking top tier for the Jones fans. Like, bro, this KO was sick, bro. KO'd Stipe, man. He KO'd a fucking senior citizen. Stipe's off to the JFL after this, per sources. He's fighting Frank Mir for the belt. Anyway, let's move on though to the next KO. Next up, Mingyang versus Riberio. I'm going to chuck this in the solid KO tier. This was a good finish. It was pretty nasty, honestly, but it's Riberio. So I kind of take it back. I will sort of be basing this a little bit off name value, but overall, this was a pretty nasty KO. Caught him with the left hook and put him away with some ground and pound shots afterwards. So yeah, good KO, deserves a mention. Anyway, let's move on. Next up, we got JDM versus Gilbert Burns, this was a solid TKO win from Jack Della Maddalena. It was a knee leading to about 40 fucking ground and pound strikes to put Burns away. So yeah, not a KO, so it can't be too high up on the list, but it still was an impressive finish that deserves to be on this list, I reckon. Anyway, let's move on. Next up, Esteban Ivanovich versus Terence McKinney. This goes in the top tier in my opinion. Now, maybe this isn't going to get like replayed that much because apparently this has just been fucking forgotten and no one remembers this KO. Go back and rewatch this. This is fucking Gregor Gillespie, Kevin Lee shit. Like, it's the same KO, and people consider that one of the best KOs in UFC history. So like, it's legitimately like pretty much the same thing, just looks slightly less aesthetically pleasing, I guess, but it's still a one shot walk off head kick fucking KO, slept him up against the cage. This is nasty. I'm gonna rewatch this KO a bunch of times, and yeah, I still think it's top 10 of the year easily. Anyway, let's move on though to the next KO. Next up, Joe Pyfer versus Marc-Andre Barriault. This was a big meaty hook if I've ever seen it from Joe the Salty Man Pyfer. Put Barriault out cold, one shot, and then landed another big shot on the ground to absolutely stretcher him. Let me tell you about this kid, Joe Pyfer. This kid's badass. Anyway, this dude swears that he hits harder than Ngannou. Like, you ain't that guy, but still, this was a sick KO. Anyway, let's move on though to the next one. Next up, we continue with the Fighting Nerds Glaze, Barriault, Paul Craig. Again, there's no there's no distinction in this tier. It's just they're all the same. They're all just Fighting Nerds KOs. Prates, Jen Silva, Borralho, Ruffy. Every single one of their finishes is going to go in this tier, except for the Dober one because it wasn't like an official KO. But yeah. Moving on. Next up, Alonzo Menifeild versus Carlos Ulberg. Pretty sick KO. Any finish that ends in like fucking 10 seconds is going to go up there. Wasn't a technical finish. Alonzo Menifeild ran in head first into the fucking cage and got slept. But still, it was a quick finish. It was a pretty tough, brutal one as well. Not like out cold, but like just a bad knockout to Alonzo Menifeild. He also got knocked out by, Azamat Murzakanov this year, which isn't going to be on this list, but still another one that deserves a mention. Anyway, let's keep it moving. Next up, Whittaker versus Ikram Aliskerov. This was a sick KO to watch live. I enjoyed it very much. It was a bit of a TKO, but it was like a pretty solid, like it was like a one shot, rocked him, had him wobbled, and then he put him down with the next shot. So it wasn't like a one punch flat out KO, but still nasty finish from Whittaker. Anyway, let's move on though to the next one. Next up, Dominic Reyes versus Dustin Jacoby. This was another finish that happened this year on the Louisville. I was trying to fucking find my words there. The UFC Louisville card. There was a bunch of finishes on that card that will be also on this one. We already had the Prates Radtke one from that card. We got a few more to talk about. But yeah, this was a sick finish from Dominic Reyes. Bit of a TKO though. Like, he did rock him, kind of punched him standing and then put him away with another shot. So yeah, can't put it too high up, but still a very good finish. Let's move on though to the next KO. Now let's stop. Let me tell you about this kid, Ziam. This kid's badass. Ziam sleeping Matt Frevola with a brutal knee in the clinch is, in my opinion, a top 5 KO of the year. If we take away name value, if you take away all. But look, Pereira KO'd Yuri Prohaska and Jamal Hill. Like, this was a top 5 in terms of like the pure KO, the technique on display, not just a big meaty hook. This was a well-timed, well-placed, non-fluky shot that slept Matt Frevola for a good couple minutes and had me thinking he was dead. So yeah, crazy KO from Ziam. Apparently he's fighting on the Saudi card is what he said. We'll see what happens there. But anyway, let's move on though to the next KO. Next up, Dustin Jacoby versus Vitor Petrino. Jacoby was on the end of one of the better KOs of the year and ended up getting one of the best KOs of the year against Vitor Petrino. Slumped him. Both thought he's fucking prime Kamaru Usman 2021 Osman, sleeping him with the right hand, I think it was, or maybe it was the left, I forget. But anyway, it was a nasty KO. Slumped Vitor Petrino, the fucking Brazilian muscle genetics fucking merchant, out cold. Glad to see it, even though I got my pick wrong. I didn't care because, yeah, fuck Vitor Petrino. Yeah, boom. Anyway, let's move on though. Next up, Carlos Prates. Let me talk about this kid, Carlos Prates. It's badass. KOing Neil Magny, another Carlos Prates finish. He's got 4 of them on this list. I was going to just put them all in like the top tier and just piss everyone off. But no, I'll leave him in the Fighting Nerds tier where he belongs, obviously. Nasty KO with the Phantom Punch over Neil Magny. People saying Magny took a dive. Kenny Okope, as per usual, living up to his name. Anyway, let's move on though. Next up, Montel Jackson versus Damon Blackshear. This was on the UFC Denver Fight Night card, and this was a nasty KO on the prelims, hidden away. 18 seconds into the fight, Montel Jackson fucking lands a right hand down the pipe and sleeps. I'm saying sleeps, not like landed it and then followed up with a few. Didn't need to follow. I don't know if he did, but he definitely didn't need to, because Montel. I've mixed their names together. Damon Blackshear was unconscious when he hit the ground. This could be higher. Another one of those sort of forgotten KOs. Like, we're going to get replays of like Poirier scam Denise, as Bedtime is calling him. But we're not going to get fucking replays of this like flatline right hand KO 20 seconds into the fight. So I'm giving it its mention that it deserves. Anyway, let's move on. Next up, this is a CGI KO. It actually didn't happen, which is crazy, but I will put this well-done piece of CGI AI material on this list, of course. Decent CGI KO from Charles Johnson against Josh Van, who still has not actually lost in the UFC. Anyway, let's move on though to the... No, it was a good finish though, but Van rebounded well, so I'll give him credit for that. But Charles Johnson, great 2024. I'm going to do a fight of the year video as well. He's up there. Anyway, moving on. Next up, Tom Aspinall beating Curtis Blaydes in basically 1 minute flat. Sick finish, but it was more of a TKO, I'll say. Blaydes was not out. He was covering. It was a warranted stoppage, but not a KO. So let's move on. Next up, Muslim Salikhov versus Song Kenan. Any spinning wheel kick one-shot KO is going to get points for me. This was a sick finish on the Macau card with a lot of other sick KO of the year contenders. This isn't going to win anyone's KO of the year, but it definitely deserves to be like a top 5, top 10 mention for sure in my books. Because yeah, spinning wheel kick, like one-shot KOs. We see like some of them, like Salikhov actually got one against Fialio where he then followed up with a few punches. But this was like one shot, bang, out. Not quite as clean as like a Barboza Terry Adam, but still very good KO. Let's move on though to the next fight. Next up, BSD vs Dustin Poirier. This is top tier, not quite top tier, but like second top tier KO. It's one of the more replayed KOs of the year. Just because it's a Dustin Poirier finish, it probably will end up being an all-time highlight, and this will just get replayed as like a Dustin Poirier best moments clip or whatever, because this is probably one of his better KOs. This, because like a lot of his finishes are like volume TKOs, not like Holloway style, but like a lot of like the McGregor KO, the Gaethje KO, like that kind of thing. This was flat out like one shot and then one shot just drilled him into the fucking canvas. So yeah, nasty KO from Dustin here. P-head. Anyway, let's move on. Next up, Mauricio Ufi versus Jamie Malaki, another Fighting Nerds KO. I don't need to explain the placement, of course, but this was nasty. It was more of a, like, not volume, but like a multi-shot, not like a one-punch, like a Prates KO, but still, very nasty. Probably the best performance, I would say, like the cleanest performance out of any of them, maybe except for, like, Prates against Jing Liang. But this was one of the better performances of the year as a whole, let alone from the Fighting Nerds group. Anyway, let's move on. Next up, Ignacio Bahamondes versus Christos Iagos. This was a sick KO, one of 2 KOs that's going to be on this list from Bahamondes, because he got another nasty finish later on in the year. But this was his first offering, a head kick KO against the seasoned vet Christos Iagos, and a nasty one at that in the first, no, not first round, might have been like second round or third round. I forget when it was, but still, head kick KO's gonna get you some bonus points. It wasn't quite as brutal as like flat out. It was a one-shot walk-off, but it didn't look like he was just like out cold. It was just like he was hurt badly. But still, nasty KO from Ignacio. Let's move on though to the next one. Next up, Bruno Ferreira versus Phil Hawes. Bruno Ferreira got 2 finishes this year. He then lost his last fight, but this was his start to 2024. A nasty volume, unconscious KO over Phil Hawes, where he landed some big shots, landed one. Phil Hawes looked like he was sort of going down slowly, and then by the time he hit the mat, he was just dead. And then Ferreira my reaction to the KO was very funny, because I was like, oh my god, he's dead. Because Phil Hawes just has spontaneous death syndrome, and that's what occurred in this fight. But still, a nasty KO from Bruno Ferreira. Let's move on though to the next finish. Next up, Ryan Spann versus Bogdan Guskov. This was where Bogdan Guskov got a nasty finish over Ryan Spann, dropped him, kind of wobbled him bad, and then landed some thunderous ground and pound, which is why it will go in the bottom tier, because it was more of a TKO, but he still did have Ryan Spann seeing stars by the end of that fight, and he's now going ahead of fighting Johnny Walker. So crazy call here, I know, but I think we're going to get a fucking knockout of the year in that contender in that fight. For me, the one, honestly. Anyway, let's move on though to the next KO. Next up, we got Vinicius Oliveira versus Bernardo Sopaj. This was a crazy KO in a very back and forth fun fight, which already got a mention in my fight of the year video, and then ended in a brutal, I mean brutal flying knee KO in the last 20 odd seconds. It's a flying knee. It's getting bonus points, you know. I've got a type for 2 things. I've got a type for big titty goth girls and Latinas, and I got a type for flying knees, you dig? Like, those are the 2 things that I love most in life. And if you're either one of those, you're getting bonus points on my list in whatever sort of favor or ranking that you would need. So yeah, this is getting a push. This is getting a top spot for me, because this was a nasty KO. Flying knee, nasty. Let's move. Also, I just checked the fucking odds. This dude is a plus 220 underdog in his next fight against Said Nurmagomedov. Yes, I know his name is Nurmagomedov, but like, bruh, This dude just tuned up Ricky Simone 30-27. And you're having him as a fucking, like, plus 220 against Said Nurmagomedov, who had a competitive loss against Jonathan Martinez. Like, bro, I'm sorry. If that line stays the way it is, I'm chucking cash on fucking Vinicius Oliveira, because I bet him against Ricky Simone after people thought he was mid, because this fight was kind of back and forth until the finish, and I won that bet. I'm betting him against Said if he's over plus 150, honestly. Anyway, let's move on. Next up, Cub Swanson versus Billy Q. I don't need to refresh your memory. Everyone's seen this KO. It happened last weekend, and a nasty one at that. Big shot that put Billy Q away and out cold in the third round. Any unconscious KO is going to get points, and also the fact that it was in a back and forth fight, it was sick, and it was Cub Swanson as well. Just the nastiness factor of this was elevated. Anyway, let's move on though to the next one. Carlos Prates. Let me tell you about this kid, Carlos Prates. No, you guys get the gist of it by now. Another Fighting Nerds KO. In my opinion, this is like one of the best performances of the year. Like, if you take away some title fights and you take away like the Max Gaethje fight and all those like Bilal fights and shit and the Marab performance, I guess, but even those, like, this is probably like one of the most flawless high level performances of the year that didn't end in round one. Like, you can say, oh, Hamza beat Whittaker. Like, yeah, he took him down, dominated him in the grappling and subbed him immediately. Like, this was like on the feet for about 11 minutes. No, not 11, 9 minutes. And Leach had some inside low kicks and he got fucking brutalized and knocked down like 6 times. This was a fucking flawless striking performance from CP. Watch out for CP in 2025. Got to get on the hype train with CP. I'm telling you. Let's move on, though, to the next finish. Next up, Alex Perez versus Mateus Nicolau. This was basically the fucking Timu Sheen version of Ilia Topuria versus Alexander Volkanovski with the slump against the fence KO, head over the knee. Brutal stuff from Alex Perez, but he's a midget, so it takes away from it a little bit. And it was in the Apex, so it's kind of like, hey, the card's done now, finally, let's go home. Like, that was the vibe of it. But still, sick KO from Alex Perez. Let's move on though to the next fight. Next up, Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikhov. Funny how some of these guys who are like on the end of a great KO end up getting their own sick KO as well later in the year. But this was the case with Randy Brown, who slept Muslim Salikhov with a clean, I think it was a right hand. It might have been a left, I'm not sure, but it was a straight punch in the apex, put him down and out. Nasty KO from Randy Rude Boy Brown. Real bad man. Anyway, let's move on though to the next fight. Next up, Diego Lopez versus Sodiq Yusuff. A TKO. It was a sick finish. It was an electric finish, but it was a TKO. It was like if it finished after like the initial uppercut, it's probably moving up a few spots, but like it was the uppercut. Yusuff gets back up. It was like another uppercut or hook around the guard, and then he kind of gets mounted and then gets pounded out to a finish. So yeah, sick finish, but not like a brutal KO. So yeah, it will go in this tier for that reason. Let's move on though to the next fight. Next up, Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill. Now, is this one of the best like technical, like flatline brutal KOs of the year? No, but it's in this tier for the reason that the tier is named what it is, which is like all-time highlight, because I do think this will be replayed forever and ever because of the pre-KO moment with the stopping of the hand, you know, the nut shot or like step back herb, and then the afterwards of the celebration, and just for the fact that people like clowning Jamal Hill, I do think this will be a finish that, despite it not being like a spinning wheel kick or a one punch flatline KO, it will still go down as like a karma fucking when trash talk goes wrong type shit. So yeah, I think this will be rewatched for years to come. Anyway, let's move on though to the next finish. Next up, we had Andre Fili getting slept out bad by Dan Ige, 50k. It was the big overhand and then that fucking follow-up shot that just drilled his head into the canvas, similar to Poirier BSD. Not quite as high profile, but just as brutal. Yeah, definitely deserves a mention. This is going in the highlight reels. Probably not all-time highlight reels, but this is definitely getting rewatched a few times. If you're going back and rewatching some KO of the year compilations, you're coming across this one for sure. Anyway, let's move on though to the next one. Next up, Jean Silva versus Charles Jourdain. Brutal uppercut in the clinch. Nasty KO from Jean Silva again in the Fighting Nerds category, because they've just got their own swag, you know, they got their own vibe, so they all get their own tier as well, because the KOs are just different with the Fighting Nerds, you dig? Anyway, let's move on. Stop, Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker got flatlines twice this year. This, I would say, was the slightly less brutal. It was still brutal, and they were very similar KOs in terms of the knockdown and then the other punch follow-up, but he just got laid out a little bit more unconscious in the other fight against Ozdemir. So yeah, this is definitely a crazy brutal KO. Was probably leading the pack for KO of the year for a bit, but eventually it did get overtaken, obviously. Anyway, let's move on though to the next fight. Next up, Morgan Charrier versus Gabriel Miranda. This was a nasty KO with, I think it was a left hook as they separated from a clinch exchange. Miranda left his hands down. Charrier got the hook up top and put him away. Pretty much out cold, not quite, but still a nasty KO. Not the worst KO on the Paris card, because that honor went to Ziam, but probably a close, not a close second, but definitely a clear second, I would say, for Morgan Charrier. Anyway, let's move on though to the next fight. Next up, Kai Kara-France versus Steve Erceg. This was a nasty finish from Kai. I'll say TKO. It wasn't like a flatline KO. It could go higher, honestly. Erceg wasn't fully out. It was like he got dropped once pretty bad, and he got dropped again. And once you kind of get dropped bad twice, within short time, they usually will just stop it. So it was a good finish, but it's not as memorable, so I won't put it too high up. Anyway, let's move on though to the next finish. Another really crazy CGI job that was done here, but it was a pretty good KO in this AI generated clip, where Ilia Topuria apparently KO'd Volkanovski, and Volk didn't potentially ruin his legacy. It was a crazy potential thing that didn't actually happen, but if it did happen, and the CGI clip itself, it's got to go top tier for sure. You know, that's going to be replayed as a fake clip for a long time to come. Anyway, good win for Ilia though. Let's move on though to the next fight. Next up, we got Johnny Walker getting stretchered by Volkan Ozdemir. This was the more brutal of the Johnny Walker flatlinings this year, I would say. Nasty combo, got him hurt, and then the final shot was a bang, put him down, and then a follow-up to just seize this man's body up in a kind of scary fashion, to be honest. Like, Johnny Walker KOs are goofy, but like, fuck, that was like, like, the Jamal KO was like Looney Tunes shit. The Uncle Ivan was like, fuck, that was brutal. But this one was like, his legs like seized up when that follow-up shot landed, so it was pretty nasty stuff. Anyway, let's move on though to the next finish. Carlos Prates once again making a feature on the list, surprise, surprise, with the KO this time over Trevin Giles in a fight which was somewhat competitive in his UFC debut, but he got the finish, laid him out cold. I love how this is going to be the fight that people point towards until he loses, which isn't going to happen, by the way, but people are going to look at this and be like, bro, he was losing to Trevin Giles, bro. It's like, yeah, okay, we can do this with every fighter. Like, but dare I say JDM looked mid against Basilov. Bro, it was the weight cut, man. Bro, Basilov was on roids, man. Yeah, I'm sorry, roids don't help you not get KO'd by fucking Oban Elliott. Anyway, let's move on though, because otherwise I'll just fucking go off on this thingy about... Anyway, let's move on. Next up, Bruno Ferreira versus Dustin Stoltzfus. This was a nasty spinning elbow, not a flatline. If this was a flatline KO, it's top tier, because again, spinning elbows, flying knees, and spinning wheel kicks are up there for the most perfect things in the world, alongside big titty Latinas. You dig? Anyway, but this was a nasty finish. It would have been better if it was flatline, but it was still a pretty sick KO. Anyway, let's move on though to the next fight. Next finish, we got Joel Alvarez against Drakkar Klose. This had the potential, if he just not fucking tried to then guillotine an unconscious body immediately after flying in. Klose was out cold. Like, don't get it twisted. Klose was unconscious. If he'd walked off after a flying knee, this is a top 10 KO of the year. I do think so, because it would look clean. But it's like, we can't get the clean KO shot of the perfect fucking out cold flying knee when he goes straight into your arm and you try and guillotine him. So yeah, Alvarez cost himself like a top 10 KO of the year nominee, because he flying kneed Drakkar Klose out cold, and then tried to guillotine him, which made the KO not look as cool. Anyway, let's move on though to the next finish. Next up, Peyton Talbot, Giannis Gamori. A decent TKO. It was against the can. The first shot probably kind of did put him out, and then like follow-ups, but yeah, I don't know, it's Gamori. I don't want to give him too much credit. Anyway, let's move on though to the next fight. Next up, Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje. There needs to be no discussion. It's the KO of the year. Like, I'm not... for most of these best of videos, I've been trying to not, like, give my best, like, the number one. I've just been trying to group them into like top 5, top 6 to sort of preview the nominations for the awards show, I guess, which I'll do in a couple days. Because this will probably be it after. Actually, I'll do Fighter of the Year and then that'll be it. But yeah, I've been trying not to give the number one spot away, but this is clear on everyone's list. It's number one, unless you're counting fucking Jairzinho Rosenstrike's TKO over Shamil Gaziev. But yeah, this is the number one in everyone's books, I do think. Anyway, let's move on though to the next finish. Next up, we got Mingxi versus Feng Xiaonan, I think her name is, or something like that. The chick that killed a bitch on the Macau card. The Chinese girl that head kicked someone into the fucking hospital. They literally had to put a neck brace on her. I don't think I've ever fucking seen that in the UFC. So for that reason alone, you're going up here. It won't be like all-time highlight because it was a fucking road to UFC and it was a women's fight. But if this was a men's fight and you put another man in a fucking neck brace, it's a top 10 replayed all-time highlight. I'm not even lying. With a fucking head kick, that's nuts. Anyway, let's move on though to the next finish. Next up, Jean Silva versus Weston Wilson, another Jean Silva finish. This one was probably honestly like not the worst, but like the least crazy impressive. It was just him using him as a punching bag because Weston Wilson's got a crackhead chin, and so yeah, he just beat him up a whole bunch of times, and then eventually the ref stopped it. It wasn't like a one-punch KO, but still, obviously on the Fighting Nerds tier. Let's move on though to the next finish. Next up, Oban Elliott versus Basil Hafez, the real JDM, Oban Elliott, the real man to finish Basil Hafez. No, this was a sick KO though, definitely deserving of a mention. I think it was, I forget what it was, like uppercut, right hand, I don't even remember, but he put him away, and then for some reason the ref required follow-up shots which weren't needed. Yeah, nasty KO, and really just shows the low level of Basil Hafez and that he probably should be KO'd by anyone who's going to be a future champion. Just saying, no, I'm kidding. JDM's good, it's just people be doing too much. People say the same thing about Prates, but like, at least Prates hasn't looked shit in one of his fights and lost to a fucking, not lost, but like, gone to a split decision with a genuine bum. Like, Basil Hafez is a genuine bum. And Oban Elliott treated him as such. Anyway, but the Randy Brown win has aged really well. That's his best win, I'll stand by that. The Gilbert Burns win, the Gilbert Burns that showed up, and the way that he won that fight was not as impressive as the Randy Brown win. Anyway, let's move on though to the next performance. Next up, Ignacio Bahamondes versus Manuel Torres, another finish from Bahamondes and another one early in the fight. This was nasty. I think it was he brought him onto a straight right, I'm pretty sure, a counter right hand. He put him down pretty bad earlier in the fight, early in the round, and then got him again with the same shot again, and then just, followed up with the necessary ground and pound. Let's move on though to the next finish. Next up, we've got Alex Pereira against Khalil Roundtree, a nasty, very nasty body shot finish combination, but again, this was basically a 3-minute TKO. Like, he had Roundtree on the fucking ropes, ready to be knocked out for like 3 minutes. Eventually gets it done. Deserves a mention because it was a main event pay-per-view fight. It was Pereira. It was brutal, but it wasn't a one-shot KO. Let's move on though to the next one. Next up, MJ with the fucking KO of the century, sleeping Ottoman Azaitar, the potato smuggler, out cold in round 2 with some nasty, super necessary follow-ups. This was a sick KO, brutal stuff, and well-deserved. Let's move on though to the next finish. Next up, I'm just shuffling some things around to fit them in, but Zach Reese against Julian Marquez, again, 20 seconds in with a fucking uppercut, put him away, nasty stuff. Again, deserves a mention. Whittaker's is probably better, like, it's more impressive, but I don't know, I'm just putting it here because the space of the images allows me to fit certain ones and not others, because we're stretching this out and getting to 50 finishes. So yeah, hope you appreciate the work we're doing. Anyway, we got a couple more to go. We finish off with the Mr. Sharma himself, Alex Portan Pereira, with the nasty KO. Basically KO'd him twice with the left hook at the end of round 1 and the head kick at the start of round 2. Brutal stuff from Alex to finish Yuri Prohaska in the main event of UFC 303. And again, one of the best KOs, one of the more iconic KOs of the year. If he walked off straight after the head kick, it probably would have just been stopped and wouldn't have needed the follow-ups. Would have created an even better clip, but still, nasty finish from Alex Pereira. Anyway, that will do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed. That is 50 of the best KOs. I think the 50 best. Maybe you can fit a few more in there. Stoltzfus against Barriault, I guess. I don't know. But that is pretty much all the ones I could think of. Let me know who I missed in the comments. But yeah, goodbye. Peace out. Have a good one. I'll see you in the next one. And thanks for 13k. Drop some other video ideas you guys want to see in the comments. And yeah, I'll live stream in the next couple of days, hopefully. Goodbye.